Welcome back to a draft podcast, a podcast about the draft. I'm Noah. He's Asher. We're sorry for the wait. Life gets in the way sometimes from this episode to this one. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyways, we're going to be talking about two prospects today, two very highly rated prospects in Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey. I'm going to be talking about Jalen Duren. Asher will be talking about Jaden Ivey. I do want to catch up a little bit quickly, though, because it's been a while since the last episode. So, how have you been, Asher?
I've been. It's playoffs are happening. They've been a little less entertaining this year than I feel like the average playoffs have been, but that could just be a me thing. I think stuff has happened, but nothing too eventful.
Yeah. I would say about the same. It's consistently upward, and I think we've both been doing a lot of work outside of the podcast for different things. You've been writing, I've been doing the videos. But the playoffs, I think there's been exciting moments, there's been less exciting moments. But yeah, let's actually get right into it. I want to start with Jalen Duren. You and I both seem to be relatively high on Duren. He's my favorite prospect in this class, personally speaking. I think that he's somebody that is closer to that 2-2 than people think. I believe you might have him in that 2, and I know other people do have him in that 2-2. He's very close for me, but I do think there are some limitations that we'll talk about. But there's a lot of good to talk about with Jalen Duren. And it all starts for me with his frame. This is somebody that's built like a tank. He's listed at 6'11". He's at most 6'10". I would say closer to 6'9". But he's every bit of that 250 pounds. He moves very well. He's somebody that's a very good athlete. It's not to say he's strong. He's also a very good athlete. Decent lateral movement. Can slide his feet. I wouldn't say he's like a full-blown switchable player like a Bam Adebayo. I don't think he's quite that level of athlete, but he's a very good athlete for his size, and especially his age. He was the youngest player in this draft until Leonard Miller declared for the draft recently. Now he's the youngest, but Duren is still the second youngest. Legitimately could still be a senior in high school right now, and he's preparing for the NBA. He's somebody that has long arms that makes up for the lack of height, I would say, because he is a bit undersized, obviously, like I mentioned. I personally think, and I'll talk about this later, the height is more of an offensive problem than a defensive problem, because the long arms does make up for it a bit on defense. He's a really good rebounder. Seems to have a lot of high motor in general, but definitely on the boards you can just tell that's where the motor stands out a lot. He's somebody that rebounds out of position. He rebounds well within position from what I've seen. He gets opportunities on the offensive glass. He just uses his physical tools to his advantage in this regard, and it's not hard to either. It's just naturally going to be hard to stop a player like this, especially at the college level, where regardless, there just aren't going to be many players that stand out, that can handle that sort of physicality. He's a really good shot blocker. He's somebody that times his blocks pretty decently. I think he's a 2 below a Chet Holmgren level shot blocker. But I still think he's very good in that regard, and not being Chet Holmgren is not a death sentence per se, because Chet's pretty elite at it, and he's someone I'm excited to talk about, at least when we eventually get to a podcast episode where we talk about him. But I do think one area that he does struggle with as far as shot blocking goes is his second jump. He doesn't have a great second jump. I don't think it's enough of a detriment to be this is a major problem that will make him not a good defensive player, because he does so many things well on defense. But if I were to knock one thing about his defense, outside of some of his decision making as a foul drawing problem that he has is the what's the word? Double jump. But for the most part, he does seem very instinctive as a shot blocker. But what I love about Duren's defense the most is his defensive feel and the intelligence on that end of the floor. It's off the charts in general. He's one of the smartest big prospects I've ever evaluated on defense. And that's just not me saying he has great feel and intelligence on defense for his age. That's me saying that he has a lot of feel and defensive intelligence in general across any age group. And you can't teach that. He's a great defensive communicator. He reads coverages very well. He can handle the switches, hedges, and drops. I think that this level of defensive feel, this level of intelligence, this level of ability to read defenses is special. And this is, to me, the biggest selling point of Jalen Duren as a prospect, because he's so, I wouldn't say the word's polished on defense, because there's definitely things he needs to work on, but his understanding of defense is so high, and he has the physical tools as well, that I think that I'm encouraged that he can figure out some of the few flaws he has. Maybe not the double jumping problem, the second jump problem, but I do think he can figure out the fouling problem in due time. It doesn't feel like he's chaotic on defense. There are moments where he will miss a play here and there, but I think that you can chalk that up a bit to him being really young, and there's so many other moments where he has a great understanding of the defense that I think is better and can overshadow that a bit. Now, offensively, there is a lot of work here. He's not a jump shooter. The free throw numbers weren't great. I will say, toward the back half of the season, he did show a lot of flashes of a mid-range game. He seemed a lot more comfortable shooting mid-range shots. I don't think there's much wrong with his form, personally. But I just don't think he'll ever be a big-time shooter or anything like that. If he showed any indicators of being a big-time shooter, and what I mean by that is if he showed like 40% of what Jabari Smith shows as a jump shooter, he would be the number one pick in the draft, in my opinion. I do want to ask you, would you agree with something like that?
It's kind of an interesting question, because I think that's such an out there hypothetical, because
it's not, I know, but like that's like the point.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
if he showed any, at first I thought about like Scotty Barnes last year from last cycle, like, if he showed signs as a jump shooter, which he did as a rookie, it's not to that level, because I've always felt like Scotty was always willing to shoot, so like, that's why I kind of threw out that idea of that comparison. But I think that if there were like signs of, okay, this guy could actually grow into a shooter, there's a chance that he probably does end up going number one because of everything else he does. But again, it's a really out there hypothetical, and there's a lot of steps that have to go into it. But go ahead.
I would say that he would be in the conversation for the number one pick. I would still probably have taken him. In that case, I would probably still have him 3-ish on my board, where as of now, I have him sitting in that, like, for me, the way my board breaks up is Paolo and Chet are tier 1, Jaden Ivey is in a tier of his own in tier 2, and then it's AJ Griffin, Jabari Smith, and Jalen Duren is at tier 3. And I think he would push himself into being in the Ivy tier, or maybe even above Ivy in his own tier, if that were to be the case. Like, I think he would be in the conversation with Chet, with Apollo, but I think it would still have some things to think about, where Chet, I think, is a better defensive prospect and can shoot, and has also shown,
So
more offensive upside than Duren.
Yeah.
And also, I think it would depend on the sort of shooter that a Duren would be.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was purely catch and shoot, then I would still take Paolo over him, because Paolo's like go-to like his ability to be a go-to scorer, or at least what I expect him to be able to do at the next level, I would value more than a Duren, depending on situation, obviously. But I think that would be a more like franchise kind of player, something that you could build around, someone who would be a primary. And maybe that's just me being higher on those two, but that's kind of my thoughts on that.
So the interesting thing about Duren's offense is, to me at least, it was very clear that he was miscast at Memphis.
Yeah.
It was like, I think like if you want to see what an ideal Duren offensive role is, watch Montverde Academy, his Montverde stuff, watch his EYBL stuff. I wouldn't say that you can watch it and be like, oh, this is the prospect, this and that, but he was put in better situations at those two situations compared to Memphis, where, I felt like they didn't utilize him properly, because I felt like his numbers could have been better at Memphis, and that's not, part of it is him, obviously. It's not always completely scheme based, but I also felt like, it's like I think he could have been like, because he averaged like 12 points, I think he could have gotten to like 15, 16, maybe 17 points if he was utilized a bit more properly on offense. But it really does speak to like what he can't do on offense as a scorer, because it's a lot of dump offs, it's a lot of rim runs. Oddly enough, I don't really know how to feel about him as a finisher on non-dunk attempts. I think that like he shows signs, and for me, it's differentiating like, okay, what could he realistically be on offense, and how much of this is just he's young and should probably still be in high school. I'm not saying that he should still be in high school. He very much shouldn't be. Like, just look at him. But he still is young. Like, that's part of it. I think he could return top 4 to 5 value in this class, which I think he might be able to anyways. But I feel like really confident if he develops that mid-range game, which is where it has to start as a shooter. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to use that, oh, he's young and can figure it out as a cop-out, because that's not always how this works. But the one thing I do think he does do well on offense is passing. He's a very good passer. He's not like, the back-to-back MVP Nikola Jokic as a passer or anything like that. The best way I could describe his passing is very similar to like Robert Williams, which is a player comp that I've seen thrown around in general for him. Don't completely agree with it, but I definitely think they do have some similarities in their game. I'm pretty sure you don't like them either. I don't like doing draft comps that much.
Yeah, it's not really my shindig.
No, I understand why people do it, but it's kind of hard, because I'm a believer in the idea that every player is like unique in their very own way, and there's so many layers to each player. But I do think that the age will help him when it comes to how teams view him. And that speaks more to the interview side of things, because from what I've heard, he's very mature for his age. Like extremely mature, head on his shoulders, carries himself very well, can be a leader on defense, which I think he showed a lot of signs of that, obviously. But I guess the best way I can describe, like, what would he be doing early on would be, defensive guy, calls out coverages, can be like kind of your defensive leader, maybe not leader, but can grow into that. Offensively, does your typical drop big stuff on offense, but does not do typical drop big stuff on defense, is the best way to put it. The passing, he reads decently out of the P&O. You saw improvement in that throughout the year. If you want more, like, I guess an in-depth idea of what his passing is, Ben Pfeiffer did a great video detailing his passing. I'll link that in the description below. You can go check that out. But, I think there's a lot here with Duren. More than I think some people believe he is. Again, like, if you can get a player that can play multiple defensive coverages, can read defenses very well, block shots, handle switches well enough. an offense, can be a passer as a role man in the PNR, can be like a solid like secondary passer, like maybe not like a primary or anything like that. Like if he was a primary passer again, he would be the number 1 pick in the draft. Like any big that can pass like can be against like legit primary signs, like you had to consider him at 1. But like hockey assists, things like that, like make the right reads. That's a player that you draft in the top 10 and you're happy with, because like that's like an all defense level player that's good enough on offense, I would say.
Yeah, I think that he will probably return top 5-ish value, whether that be top 6, top 4, somewhere in the top 5-ish range. And like you mentioned, his passing is the best skill to me on offense, because a lot of his offense is the dump offs, is the dunks, the stereotypical, oh, he's a rim running kind of big. And the only thing that really separated him from that archetype was his passing, because like on post ups, he shot percentage 40% on 65 attempts, which is not good.
No,
and
not very good.
Yeah, on like around the basket with his dunks, he was a good finisher, but with his touch on layups, on post hooks, on all that kind of thing, he did show like he kind of struggled on that.
It was sporadic.
And
that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, he had flashes of having good touch, but it was not a consistent
like
effort,
there's not like
effort,
signs. It's like there's enough signs here that he can have good touch, but it's not consistent yet. I will say, like, outside of like the shooting, and like kind of the post up, but I do think there can be something there, because he's just so strong to the point that there's some players that he could probably just back down. Like
probably,
but like there's still a lot of work there. But I'm a bit more encouraged by potential as a post up player with him than as a shooter. Like, which there isn't a lot of potential there to begin with. But like outside of that, there really isn't a lot that I can look at and say, I don't know if he'll ever be good at this. Like, that's the best way I can play. But granted, those two things that he's like, I don't know if he'll ever be good at, are kind of important. Important for if he wants to reach like all-star, all-NBA level upside. Not important in he can play in the NBA. Because it would shock me if he isn't like a 5 to 10 year pro. Like, I know it's a big range, but like if he's on, it would shock me if he doesn't make it to a second contract. Like,
yeah, I think that I have more questions offensively about him than you do, because when I watch him post up, I'm someone who's covered one of the best post players in the league in Nikola Jokic, because I'm a writer about the Denver Nuggets. So I have a lot of experience watching one of the best post up guys in the league. And the thing that makes post game interesting to me, because there's a lot that goes into it. There's counters. There's watching Draymond Green versus Nikola Jokic in the postseason was a masterclass on both sides of how to play defense and how to play offense. And Jokic was able to create opportunities against the best defender of this generation in the post through counters. And if you look at a lot of the good post players, Embiid is another great example of, he has a lot of counters. His like repertoire in the post is astounding. Both of those two players are the best post guys in the league, and it's because they are crafty in the post, not because of their physical dominance, even though both can establish themselves as physically dominant in the post. And Duren didn't show many counters at all.
Can I clarify when I say that? Like, I'm not saying like every player, because like I think defensive players are smart enough now to know. But like I think that there are definitely like there's a decent chunk of players that like they just aren't going to be able to handle that physicality. Because the thing is, like, I don't think he's done like, it's very possible he's not done like filling out his frame completely, which is wild to think about. Because he's huge, like
massive.
Like he's anytime you like, he's one of those guys like you watch like if you're watching a game, like he stands out. Like that guy's a basketball player. Like, and I think that the way I think about it is like, because like when I think like relative to frame, he looks bigger than Jalen Johnson does. Like from who's on the Hogs and went to Duke, he looks a lot bigger than him on tape. Like as far as like frame goes, Jalen Johnson is one of the biggest players like I've ever seen in person. Like that's a big human being, and I think Duren might be even bigger than that, which is wild. I think for me though, like again, like teams will bank on it. I kind of bank on it. I used to bank on this a lot, but I don't really bank on it as much anymore because I think there's more to it. Is he's super young. Like there's like age wise, he probably shouldn't even be here right now. Like, and you know, like you're willing to bet on a player that shows enough of a foundation of a skill of a player of what they can do, and maybe they can grow into something. It's not something you bet on all the time. I'm not betting that he will ever be a great offensive player. I think realistic outcome for his offense would be like maybe a slightly higher volume like Robert Williams on offense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, because Rob, I think, averages like 8 points a game. I think Duren could average like 12 or 13 points a game, but it's doing similar stuff to that.
Yeah.
And I also think like Robert Williams, he's going to be somebody that the assist numbers don't always show how good of a passer he is. Because Rob only averages like 1 assist per game. But his passing is like off the charts for his position.
Yeah.
Like I think like there's an argument that he's like one of the best. Like the best one arguably you can make an argument maybe Robert Williams the best non-Jokic big passer. Like which I think has to be a thing now. Because if we just make it best passing big, like we all know the answer. So like to make the conversation more interesting, you kind of have to do like best non-Jokic one. But I like Duren a lot. When I talk about team fits though, Portland. I would love to see him go to Portland. They have 2 first-round picks, 2 likely top 10 picks. That would be fun. I would really like that fit because, you know, Nurkic is probably at the door at this point. I don't know what his future is. And if you're going into... They say they're trying to build around Dame. I have doubt about that. But during somebody like you bring in, like that could like set the culture for your team. For your new era. Maybe he'll never be like the guy. Yeah. But like he sets the foundation of, you know, smart, mature, you know, plays his ass off. Like that's one thing about him. He plays hard. Like, his motor runs very high, and I think that having a player like that, like be like one of your first draft picks, like that could set the culture there. No, OKC obviously they need a big.
Yeah.
I think he fits in with them very well. That would be a pick they make if like they land outside of like the top 4, we'll say. Because I do think that some of the other like Jabari, like I think there's 4 players that fit better with what they want or have too much potential to pass on. But like their team, if Houston falls out of the top 3, I think that you could maybe consider him as well. That's another team. You know, those are the teams. I think honestly, like Indiana might be the most like scheme-proof team in this draft. We're like. I think like every player, I'm like, okay, they could probably go there, and it could work. So, yeah, I like him a lot. I think he's so fun to watch on tape. Because usually when you see a player like this, like you expect him to just like out physical everyone, but he's just so smart. And to see the way that he, you know, he's not like this out of this world passer, but like he makes good reads. And then defensively, just to watch him, like, the way he thinks on defense is just very fun to watch. He's not perfect, obviously. My draft range with him would be, like, 5, like, at the very earliest, 4. If he makes it past, like, 8, I would consider that a steal.
Mm-hmm.
I saw some mock drafts with him going outside the top 10. If he makes it out of the top 10, I'm going to label him steal of the draft. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Because, like, this is a legit, like, guy that could be, like, a top 5 guy in this class to me.
Yeah.
But, you know, the best way I could put it is, like, you're not just drafting a big man that's strong and athletic. You're drafting someone that could be your defensive quarterback, anchor your defense, be a leader. And to have someone that shows those signs while being the second youngest player in the draft, I think that that's impressive.
Yeah, I think he is someone who will be. He's a high floor guy, and he doesn't have the highest ceiling. He's like a medium ceiling guy to me because I don't think he will ever be like.
I think borderline all-star is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think he will be like one of those sub all-star guys who gets in on an appearance or two at his ceiling.
Yeah.
But the ability that he has to fill in a lot of pick and roll schemes, whether it be drop where he showed a lot of promise, he showed a lot of, like he is a good drop big. He is able to block shots. He's able to deter people from the rim. He also played at the level a lot, which is one of the more utilized defensive schemes when it gets to the postseason. And if you need to get the ball out of someone's hands, you ice the ball handler. He was able to do that. He had some switchability to him. I think a team that you didn't mention that I would like him in is San Antonio. He feels just like a Spursy sort of pick to me.
I've talked about that for months too. I'm like, this is a Spurs play. It has completely split my mind. I don't know. I thought they didn't have a pick because I keep on forgetting. I think in my mind, because playing teams, I think they're picking outside the top 10. But I'm pretty sure the Spurs have top 10 odds. I just completely forgot about that.
They have 9.
Yeah. If he makes it to 9, they should just run that pick up. Don't even worry about taking time off the clock. Just run that pick up.
I think there's a lot of teams that take upside swings that would probably do well with picking a Duren.
And this is a thing. It's an upside swing, but it's also this is a guy that can contribute. I believe this is a guy that can play right away. This is not a Kai Jones last year, or this isn't I wouldn't say it's similar to Onyeka Okongwu because Okongwu, if he didn't get hurt, would have played right away. Which is another comp he gets. I don't think he quite has the movement skills that Okongwu has. He is very Duren has very good movement skills. Okongwu has dare I say generational movement skills for a big man. The way he moves is because we saw him in person when we were in Atlanta. The way he just flies around the floor is just incredible. But Duren, I think he's gonna be. I think this is one of the safest bets to be at the very least a solid NBA player, especially among those top 10 guys. Which you don't say a lot about somebody that is the second youngest player in the draft a lot of the time.
Yeah, he, like I was saying, I think a lot of NBA teams might overlook him because of the lower ceiling than some of the guys that I've seen in mocks over him. But I think he is a safe bet. I think while you might not get an all-NBA sort of guy, you will get someone who will at least be a very good role player. And that we've seen in the playoffs that is important to have people who you can have around your stars. And while he doesn't have star upside to me personally, I think that he will be someone who is in the NBA for a very long time.
Yeah.
He will be 30 in his 12th year in the NBA. He will be someone who is able to have longevity. And I think that a team should pick him probably top 7.
Oh yeah, easily.
At the very least. If he slides past, I'd say 6 or 7. That's probably a steal because
if he slides past 6 or 7, if teams should be calling on the phone to try and move up. Teams should be calling whoever has the 8th pick. The 8th pick's phone should be blowing up at that point, or the 8th pick just take him. But it's rare. Again, it's rare that you have a player that has a high floor, but will also be younger than some draft picks will be by the time he gets his second contract. You just don't see stuff like that. But the other player we want to talk about, because I talked about my favorite player, I think it's time that you talk about your favorite player, Jaden Ivey.
Yeah, the first player I wrote a piece on this cycle was Jaden Ivey, and that was because I really had a fun time watching him, analyzing him, and I've had him top three for basically this entire cycle. I beat some people to the punch on that. I know he's pretty consensus top four now, top three, top four. It kind of depends on who you ask, but he started the cycle as like a late lotto, late 10 kind of guy, and I've had him top three this entire cycle because of the first thing that you notice about him is his burst. His athleticism is something you don't see very often. He has the sort of athleticism that makes quick guards special, and his ability to just blow by guys to get to the rim in like 2 seconds is incredible. There are many plays where he gets a rebound and then turns in transition, and he has gotten an and one in like 4 seconds. It is really incredible to
Mm-hmm.
watch, and with his athleticism, it's the thing that initially catches you. But once you really lock into him, you notice little things about his game where he improved a lot as a shooter from last cycle to this one. He improved his shot by 10% from three, and that's including a real big drought for the last 15 or so games where he shot sub 30%. But before that, he was shooting over 40. And I think with the average of 36% after the season, that's about where he should be. I
Mm-hmm.
think he was a little hot to start the season, a little cold to end it. I think he's about where he should be percentage wise. There was a lot of improvement on his footwork, shooting wise. There's still a lot of room to go, but he did improve that portion of his game from last cycle to this one. He improved as a decision maker. I think while he's not someone who is going to make the most advanced reads, which is why I don't really see him as a one in the NBA. I
Mm-hmm.
think he will be a secondary kind of guy. I don't think he's someone who will be running your offense consistently, but there are a lot of flashes off of his driving kicks where he drives in, and as soon as he gets by his man, the defense has to focus on him because he is so quick. He is so explosive that if he gets an inch on his guy, he's getting a foot and, dunking it or getting a ridiculous layup because he has good touch around the rim. He was able to just kind of get to the rim with ease, and to prevent that, you have to focus on him. And when the defense did crash, he's good at finding the open man. He's good at finding someone who was left open from help, or just if the defense scrambles, he's good at exposing that. And he doesn't make the most advanced reads, as I said. He has an issue with predetermining things, but I think there is a way for him to be a pretty reliable playmaker. Not anyone who will be like, a generational passer or anything like that, but I think he'll be a relatively solid one at the next level. As far as his shot goes, there are issues with it. He's a very set foot kind of shooter. Like, he's a very set shooter. He needs to improve on, getting open off movement and being able to actually just shoot off movement, where he was able to get open a lot off ball, but he has to take a second to get his feet ready, and the shot wasn't as open as it could have been. That's something that I'd like to see him improve on. I think as far as the biggest hole on his offensive game, it is kind of the in-between game between the three-point line and the rim, because he did not shoot well from mid. He did not have, a very reliable in-between game, and it was pretty
Mm-hmm.
non-existent, honestly. Like, he didn't shoot much from there, and when he did shoot from there, didn't shoot well. He is someone who needs to get better at that. He needs to develop, whether it be a floater, a mid-range jumper, just something that he can go to so that teams can't just drop all the way to the rim and play him all the way up. there needs to be something in between there. And he also needs to improve in his pacing. He learned a lot about how to do that throughout the season. He improved on, playing at his own pace and not always having his foot 100% on the gas, but he still needs to improve there because you watch him and there are a lot of times where he's just going with a full head of steam and he overdoes a layup. He puts too much on it or he gets stripped or something
the Westbrook
along
special.
the lines of and that's something where he really needs to get better at because if he doesn't, he will fall under the Westbrook thing. But I think Westbrook is just better than him. Like there's just more to Westbrook than, or at least prime
Westbrook.
Now.
We'll say,
we'll say whatever. But
if he's not as good as Westbrook is now, and at any point in his career, I would be shocked.
That would be a concern. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I would say this, though. Westbrook is an underrated passer. I know he stat pads a bit, but, he has good vision. He can run an offense a bit. But, I find it interesting you brought up the Ivy thing with the finishing problem, with him finishing out of control. It's rare to see that in an athlete like him. Because he's not, a super, super power athlete. He's a gliding athlete, from what I've seen. It's a lot about the speed. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, it's not something where he is not good at finishing. He has good touch. He just needs to work a bit on his feel for the game. His ability to slow down is going to be a big thing because if he can't do that, then it'll be an issue. But if he can be able to slow down just a slight bit, take it from fourth gear to third, and be able to kind of just be able to put it in softer, put it in, with less to it, I think that'll help him a lot. And I think that's probably his biggest area to improve besides the in-between stuff. Because the in-between stuff was literally non-existent and throughout the entire season, but the ability to, change gear, change of pace, that kind of stuff, that was shown progression throughout the season. But as far as other stuff goes, defensively, he needs to just be more engaged. When he was engaged, he had good off-ball defense. He was able to disrupt some passing lanes, to disrupt some cuts. But there were a lot of times where he would ball watch, where he would just kind of fall asleep, and it was a lack of defensive engagement. And I'm willing to bet on that changing with, a reduced role probably to start off. And, just NBA development is a lot better than NCAA stuff. And he also had some flashes of good screen navigation, but it was a mixed bag for sure, where he would sometimes die on screens. He would sometimes be able to navigate them, get steals. It was a real mixed bag. You got flashes of both good and bad with him on basically everything with defense, but, it's kind of hard to not like a guy when there are plays where he gets really good blocks, he gets good steals, and his athleticism will also help him a lot on that end. But defensively, there's definitely more to work on than offensively, but I think at the end of the day, he'll be at least a fine defender. I don't know if I'd bet on him being a good defender, but I think given time to progress and get good development, I think he will be a fine defender.
I think it's a case of I don't know if he'll ever be as good of a defender as maybe his athleticism suggests that he should be. But he's going. I think he can also be a non-liability either. Ivy's one of 15 freak athlete guard prospects since 20 since 2020. The 2020s just feel like the freak athlete guard era. Because, the Ant, obviously, you have... I guess you can say 2019 with, Ja as well. Jalen, obviously, last year. You have Ivy this year. You have the Thompson twins and Derek next year. Like, there's just so many freak athlete guards that are coming out that it's wild to think. Because, like, I think, like, in another world, like, you can probably say, oh, yeah, like, Ivy's, like, the best, like, is just the most athletic guard prospect of, like, the last, like, 10 to 15 years. But there's just been so many great athletic guard prospects that's kind of hard for me to even say that.
Yeah.
I don't agree with the John Morant comparison at all.
Yeah, no. They're
I
very
do
different
think they
players.
have some similar mannerisms, though. Like, kind of the way, like, not like the dribbling ability, but the way they, like, set up dribble, hang dribble, stuff like that. It's kind of similar. Athletically, the best way I would describe it is if you were to put, like, a poll, because I do think these are two different, like athletes, of, like, Anthony Edwards and Jalen Green on, like, two sides. Ivy falls somewhere in the middle between those two as far as, like, the traits, because I think he's definitely more powerful of an athlete than Jalen is. But I think there's a lot more finesse to it than Anthony Edwards has. Where they're all different athletes, but I think, like, it's a semi-powerful, like, gliding athlete is the best way I can put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
because he's definitely bigger.
athleticism-
He's bigger than I think some people think he is because of the jaw comparison. Because he's like 200, 210, something like that.
Yeah,
But he's not Anthony Edwards, who's
far from that.
I think you can make an argument that Anthony Edwards is the most physically gifted shooting guard of all time. Like, I'm not even joking about that. Like, athletes just aren't built like that. But I like Ivy a lot. I don't think I like him as much as you do. I have him number 4 on my board. You have him number 3. I think it's close enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Jaw stuff. Ja is a better playmaker than him. I think.
I
Ja
don't
is
think that's
better
up for
the game.
debate.
Yeah,
Because
Jaden
people
is
forget Ja is a legitimately, like, good passer.
Yeah.
And when he was coming out of Murray State, he was an elite passing prospect. And I think he's supported that his assist numbers don't always reflect how good of a passer he is. Like, he's a much better passer than, like, the 6 assists per game he averaged this past year. But I think not being Ja does not mean you can't be good either.
Yeah, obviously.
It's like,
I think he has his perks over Ja. I think he's a better shooter than Ja. I think he's
I agree with that.
far better shooting prospects than Ja was.
Yeah, I have less questions about his form.
Yeah.
Because Ja has a bit of a
And-
funky thing going on with his side pocket still. That bothers me.
Yeah. And I think he will be better than Ja is defensively because Ja has been.
Well, Ja's also
having-
not good. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. He's been having defensive issues.
But Ja also is, like,
but-
a string bean. Like,
Yeah.
like there's a bit of it. And Ivy's kind of built. Like, I guess, like, if you're going to compare it, it's kind of like, it's like if it's the Ja aesthetic, but he's bigger than Ja is. But he's not Ja. Like, they're different players. But the aesthetic is somewhat similar. Like, I understand, like, it's only interesting. I understood where it come from, but I never, like, even came close to agreeing with it.
Yeah.
What do you think for
Yeah,
team
I
fits,
think-
though? That's right.
Yeah, team fits. I like Indiana a lot. That's one
Hometown
that has
team.
been- that's one that's been proposed a lot. I like his fit with Tyrese Halliburton. I think both of them complement each other well. I think both would allow the other to play a little more off ball than Ivy did at Purdue, and I think he allows Halliburton to play a little bit more off ball than what he was doing in Indiana to end the season. And I think that would unlock both a little bit more offensively. I like his fit in Detroit with Cade. Similar thing to Tyrese. I think both of them allow them to play off ball a little more, free up just a little bit more room for both of each other on offense. Teams I don't like are ones like Houston or Orlando, where they already kind of have their backcourts. I think Houston would be fine because I think he'll be better than KPJ.
Yeah, but like, also, like, there's so many things I don't think I can say right now about KPJ. So, like, that I think, like, yeah, I'd be better fit there. Orlando is just not a. Yeah, I don't agree with Orlando. Like, that's a spot I want him going.
Orlando should be looking for someone like
They're looking for a
Paolo.
winger big at this point.
Yeah,
Big
because I
actually,
think
because they have the wing. They have.
I think they should find a non-guard guy because they're already loaded with
Oh no, they have like eight.
guard
They have like
prospects.
4 guards that can start. that
And I
keeps them
think
for them.
I think Ivy will be the best of if he were to
Yeah, I
go
think
to Orlando.
I think it's
But
interesting. So I actually
also,
have a. I think I'm pretty sure I had a similar grade for Ivy as I did Suggs.
mhm.
And Suggs, I want to give time still because he was clearly hurt his rookie season.
Yeah.
Like it was just evident watching him play. There were plays that he just wasn't making that I knew if he was healthy he could make. So I do want to give him a bit of time.
I think Suggs will be good. I'm just kind of higher
Yeah.
on Ivy, I think, than most. I think Ivy's floor is like a good like starter. Like I think or like 6-man, but like starter level player.
Like
'Cause I think
Colin Sexton.
If he it's sorta, I
Kinda.
guess.
Well, Colin Sexton's weird because his production's really good, but like
Yeah.
you just don't know how it works for a winning team.
Yeah.
It's weird to say it's like that, but
yeah, but I think he has a high ceiling though. I could see
I
him,
do as well.
I think I could see him being a perennial all-star,
So, yeah.
which is
Um,
higher than most people think it is, but I think if a lot of the stuff were to come together, if he were to get his change of pace down, if he were to be able to utilize his athleticism more on defense by being more engaged, and even if the in-between game is still a little lacking, if he can just get 1 or 2 things there going, I think he has an avenue to be sort of a perennial all-star sort of guy.
I heard some Victor Oladipo comps. I understand where they come from. I don't agree with them because Victor Oladipo, that 1 year in Indiana, you could make an argument he was like a top 15, top 10 player that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if he never deals with the injuries, like his trajectory is just like all NBA. Because that was a player that could put up like 23 to 25 points and also be one of the best defensive players in the league.
Yeah.
I don't think Ivy's going to be that.
Mm-mm.
I think a more realistic outcome, and it's going to sound crazy because he's been awesome. Like I think the most, if I was like realistic high end outcome, like Zach LaVine, not like similar players, but like because like I think because LaVine is like one of the most efficient guard screws like ever during his time in Chicago. But I think like, and it's a super super high end outcome, mind you. Like I'm not saying this is like this is like the realistic one, like but someone that could average like be a borderline all NBA guy and average like 25 plus a game. Like if
I'm
everything breaks right, that could happen for him. But maybe a step below that is more realistic for me. That's how I feel about it. But I would love to hear you feel about like, what his ceiling is. Like
I think his ceiling is a Zach LaVine sort of player where he is an all-star sort of guy. I think with all the guard prospects that are coming out and all the guards that are already in the league,
yeah, that's another thing I was thinking about.
You will have a hard time making like a lot of all-star teams.
That's what I think
he
people
could
don't
be
understand
an
when you
all-star level
project,
player.
though. I'm sorry, I interrupted you again. That's what I meant. But I think that's something that people like don't realize when I say, like players that are really good. But I'm like, you have to understand, like the league. There's no such thing there's no such thing as a bad draft anymore. Like we're never gonna have 2,000 anymore. Like we'll never have that. But like I think that with the influx of talent entering the league, I think the league, like as far as prospects goes, it's one of the most talented it's ever been, if not the most talented it's ever been. So projecting top 10 players is gonna be hard.
Yeah.
Like. You have to be like special. Like you have to be like a Victor Wembanyama. You have to be like a Cade Cunningham or Luka Doncic or Zion. Or I guess maybe not to the complete extent, but like to a certain extent, even like a Scoot Henderson. Like you just have to like be like super super special.
Yeah.
And you have to like be like, this guy's like Scoot Henderson. I know like it would shock me if he's not starting the league. That's the thing, like, like you see what he does. I'm not saying like Ivy like has like high bust potential, But it's also hard to project a player like him being. It's possible because anything's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody thought Steph Curry would be Steph Curry. Nobody thought James Harden would be James Harden. They thought they would be good, but they didn't think they would be, two of the in Curry's case like a top 2 point guard ever, in Harden's case like a top 4 shooting guard ever. Like nobody thought that would be the case. So that's the thing. You gotta see how these things play out. Like,
Yeah.
I would have loved somebody's like I would love Paulo to be an MVP guy. I would love to see Chet be like this dominant like 2-way player. But it's always going to be hard to project something like that.
Yeah. One last thing, and I think this will be a hot take, but it would not shock me if Jaden Ivey were to be the best player in this draft when it's all said and done. I think he has that amount of upside. I wouldn't bet on it per se because I don't have number one. So
I don't fully disagree.
Yeah.
I will. I just think that like Paulo is such a toolsy player. Like there's just so much that he does. That's hard for me to kind of like say that. And Paulo, I mentioned in the last one. I think Paulo's the only one with like legit like franchise player upside. Like I'm like, if I were to bet on who's going to be like the franchise player from this class, like I would bet on Paulo. But I think Ivy could. It's very possible. Like And again, you don't know how these things are going to play out. If you look at the top 10 players in the league, like the only ones that we look at and be like, okay, we expected them to be this good are like Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic. Like nobody thought Jokic would be this good. People didn't even know Joel Embiid would be playing basketball after 2 years after he got drafted. Like there were legit talks that he may never play. Nobody thought Curry would be what he is.
No one thought Giannis would be.
Giannis would be like. Yeah, people thought Giannis had a lot of potential, but nobody thought he would be like the most dominant player of the last like 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, no one thought he would be the best player in the league.
Like, oh yeah, so that's, and again, I think, I don't know if that's true for you, but that's what makes it fun for me. Like not knowing, like no matter how much work you put in, like anything could happen. Like we saw last year with Franz Wagner and Scotty Barnes. Like nobody thought they would be the scorers they were. And
the draft is an educated crapshoot.
Yeah. An incomplete science.
You can use a lot of the work that you do to project things, but at the end of the day, development paths all vary. There's no strict, this guy is going to end up from point A to point B. There are more likely outcomes for a lot of guys, but like I'm low on Jaden Hardy. Jaden Hardy could end up being the best player in this class.
We just don't know.
We just don't know. Yeah, and a lot of guys don't like to admit that kind of thing. But
I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. There's so many prospects I've been wrong on.
Yeah.
And for better or for worse. Like that's the thing. It's like baseball. That's the best way I could put it. It's like baseball where you hit like high 20s, low 30s. You're doing a good job. Like, because again, like you're only gonna get like 25% of what you get right, and that's like a high-end outcome of what you get right per draft class. Personally speaking, I think like I only get around like 10 to 15% right a year. I think it's gonna get better as time goes on, but I don't think I don't think anyone ever has like anything higher than like 30% of a draft right. Because there's just so many factors that go into this.
Yeah. There's off the court stuff that people don't know about unless you're involved in the league.
And neither of us, I think both of us, like we somewhat I can find stuff, but like even you and I both, we don't know everything.
Yeah.
Like, and that's fine. I always tell people like, like, don't be discouraged because you got something wrong because something happened off the court. Like if you like new and starting out, because like you had no idea that could happen. Like
and like last draft was my first, and I was right on Ayo Dosunmu. Like I thought he could come in and be a productive player right away, and look what he did with the Bulls. I was lower on Franz Wagner than I should have been.
I was lower on him too.
On Scotty Barnes than I should have been. I was a little higher on Şengün than I probably should have been. Like there are so many players that even last season, like you're going to be wrong on a lot of guys.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day,
and also don't get discouraged after 1 year.
Yeah. Like, do your best.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work out, there are a bunch of NBA scouts that have done well either. So like,
there's the reason teams make draft mistakes. Like,
yeah,
everyone makes mistakes in this. And again, I always say the thing I want to preach the most is don't get discouraged after winning. Like maybe I shouldn't have had him as high as number 4. I think looking back on that, I probably shouldn't have. But I'm still very high on Jaden Springer. Like I think if he gets opportunity, he can be a good player. Like I'm not giving up on a player after a rookie year, and you shouldn't do that either. Like,
like Jalen Suggs, he struggled this season, but there was a reason that he was touted the way he was, and he will hopefully get a more of a chance to show that going forward. But also don't be like a lot of guys are condescending about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Don't listen to them because at the end of the day, probably as much as they do. There are people who know more than others, for sure, but everyone has their own way of looking at tape. Everyone has their own interpretations of tape. And at the end of the day, tape doesn't say everything. Neither does off-the-court stuff. And it's impossible to tell the future without some magic, and magic isn't real. So,
yeah, unless it's Magic Johnson. I'd like to apologize. My parents were just informing me that they were going out to get pizza for dinner. So, I don't know if you heard that, but I heard it. So... And that's a thing on YouTube. I feel like people do like they like, oh, did you hear that? But like, you couldn't hear it. Oh yeah, a plane crashed outside my house. Like I did not hear that at all. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm very excited that we finally able to get this out. Next episode, we are going to be doing a mock draft. So, I'm very excited about that. Probably first round. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, but leave a comment down below, like it. Or dislike it if you didn't like it. That would hurt my feelings, and I don't know about Azu, but that might hurt my feelings. But if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. Subscribe if you haven't already. Follow us on Twitter. I'll put those in the description below. Go check out Ben Pfeiffer's video about the Jalen Duren passing. And you can go check out episode 1 if you haven't already. We talked about the Duke prospects. And yeah, maybe leave some thoughts below. And we'll see you guys in the next one.